There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the mind finally exhausts itself from trying to untangle the mechanics of the unseen realm. You spend days, months, even years attempting to calculate divine timing, to measure the invisible distance between your desire and its manifestation, to analyze the subtle movements of God operating within your consciousness. The rational mind works tirelessly, as though it could pry open the mysteries of creation through sheer effort. Yet I tell you with the utmost clarity that the very moment you stop interrogating life with the question how, the instant you relinquish the compulsion to understand the machinery behind the universe, something remarkable happens. You step into a higher dimension of living where miracles flow with the same naturalness as breathing. In that state, the imagination becomes unshackled, liberated from the burdens of logic and linear thinking. Suddenly the world begins shaping itself around your inner state with astonishing ease, as though it had been waiting all along for you to let go. This surrender opens the door to effortless manifestation, where results appear not through strain, but through alignment. The great secret I have shared for decades is profoundly simple, yet its simplicity causes many to overlook its divine power. Your imagination is the creative force of God operating through you. When you ask how, you unknowingly confess disbelief in that creative power. You admit that you trust the external more than the internal, the world of shadows more than the world of substance. You place more faith in circumstances than in consciousness. But when you accept the end is already accomplished within your imagination, something sacred unfolds. The unseen bridge of incidents begins to assemble itself, without your supervision, without your interference, without your mental strain. God in you, the deeper self, knows the path between your imaginal act and its outer fulfillment with infinite intelligence. The human mind, with all its logic, strategies, and fears, does not. When you surrender the need to control the path and instead claim the end boldly, the power that formed worlds moves through you unobstructed. You become the vessel through which God effortlessly expresses creation. You must understand the question how is the language of limitation. It comes from a mind that has not yet fully accepted the imaginal act as the root cause of everything it encounters in physical reality. If you truly knew in the marrow of your being that imagining creates reality, you would never again torment yourself with questions about the mechanics of manifestation. You would know that the unseen world is the only true cause, and the seen world is merely the effect. Instead of analyzing the path, you would rest in the inner fulfillment, trusting the divine process unfolding beneath the surface. For when you live from the feeling of the wish fulfilled, without wavering, the path reveals itself without your participation. Your only responsibility is the assumption, the inner acceptance of the end. Everything else, every detail, every connection, every movement arranges itself in perfect order. Asking how disrupts the process, for it signals doubt. But abandoning how restores your identity as the operant power, the creator, the imaginer through whom God acts. Many have written to me with anxious hearts saying, "Neville, I believe, but I do not see movement." And I always reply with the same gentle truth, the movement is within you. That is the only place movement must occur. Outer movement is simply the shadow of inner transformation. When the inner man shifts, the outer world reorganizes itself with mathematical precision, as though responding to an invisible command. But this process cannot be witnessed with the physical eye until its unfolding is complete. Spiritual germination happens in silence. Just as you cannot see the roots of a plant forming beneath the soil, you cannot see the rearrangement of circumstances taking place beneath the surface of consciousness. And so I urge you, do not uproot the seed by questioning the soil. Do not destroy the process by doubting its progress. Your inner shift is the movement, the only movement required. When your assumption becomes stable, firm, and unwavering, the outer world must follow, for it has no choice but to mirror your inner state. Imagine for a moment the absurdity of planting a seed and then anxiously kneeling beside the earth every hour, asking, "But how will the roots form? How will the stem push through the soil? How will the flower know when to bloom?" The seed does not need your questions. It carries within itself the intelligence of life. The soil does not need your anxiety. It knows how to nurture what you have planted. Likewise, your imagination does not require your constant interrogation. The creative power of God already knows the path from your imaginal act to its physical manifestation. When you imagine the end with conviction, you plant a spiritual seed. Your job is simply to nurture the feeling of fulfillment and trust the life that flows through you to complete the work. Just as nature never rushes yet accomplishes everything, so too does imagination unfold its creations effortlessly. The question how is nothing more than spiritual interference. It reveals a lack of trust in the life principle operating within you. Release it, and manifestation becomes as inevitable as the blooming of a flower. I have said repeatedly, and I say it again, man is all imagination, and God is man's imagination. If this is true, and it is undeniably true, then every time you ask how, you momentarily step outside your divine identity. You shrink back into the shell of human reasoning, forgetting the infinite creative power that resides within you. You become like the prodigal son, wandering far from his father's house, attempting to sustain himself on the husks of logic rather than the abundance of faith. The how is a form of spiritual amnesia. It makes you forget who you are, a creative being endowed with the same power that shaped galaxies. When you doubt your imagination, you deny your inheritance. But the moment you abandon the need to understand the mechanics, the moment you trust the imaginal act as the true cause, you return home. You stand again in your rightful place as the operant power. You reclaim the authority that has always been yours. From that state, creation is effortless, for you are aligned with your divine nature. When you stop asking how, something extraordinarily beautiful happens. Your state of consciousness stabilizes. No longer are you tossed about by waves of doubt, fear, and contradictory thoughts. You cease the exhausting cycle of believing one moment and questioning the next. Instead, you enter a calm, centered, unwavering awareness of your desired end. In this stillness, you no longer vacillate between faith and fear, hope and hesitation. You dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled with quiet, steady conviction. And when your inner atmosphere becomes consistent, when your consciousness holds the same tone day after day, the outer world must reflect that stability. It has no choice. Consciousness is the only cause. Asking how destabilizes you. It pulls you out of the end and drops you back into the realm of uncertainty. But when you release that question and return your attention to the fulfilled desire, your inner world becomes harmonious, and the outer world mirrors that harmony. Life becomes smoother, gentler, more orderly, because you have stopped disturbing the creative process with doubt. Many people misunderstand the nature of faith, and because of this misunderstanding, they misapply the power within them. Faith is not hoping for something to happen, nor is it wishing that circumstances will eventually favor you. Faith is not waiting anxiously for a sign or bargaining with the universe in exchange for evidence. No, faith is far more majestic, more definite, more creative. Faith is the effortless acceptance of the imaginal act as fact. Faith is knowing that when you have seen the desired outcome vividly within your imagination, when you have felt its reality with the full depth of your being, you have already acquired it. It exists now in the unseen and will inevitably externalize itself. The question how is incompatible with faith, because faith assumes accomplishment, not possibility. Faith does not wonder about process. It rests in fulfillment. When you truly possess faith, your inner world becomes your guarantee. You feel the truth of the unseen so profoundly that the outer world becomes irrelevant until it catches up. The moment you ask how, you reveal that you have not yet accepted the inner act as real. But when faith is present, how dissolves, for the end is already lived within. The truth is that the question how arises from a mind addicted to control, a mind that has been trained to believe that everything must be managed, planned, orchestrated, and handled through personal effort. You want to choreograph the miracle. You want to instruct God on which route to take. You want to micromanage divine orchestration, unaware that such interference disrupts the very process you seek to understand. But creation does not unfold by human strategy. It unfolds through spiritual law, a law that operates independently of your rational mind. The moment you surrender the mechanics, truly surrender them, the miracle traffic begins to move, the channels align, the people, events, timing, and circumstances assemble with graceful intelligence. The universe breathes more freely when you remove your hands from its steering wheel. Your attempts to control the process clog the flow, but your willingness to trust releases it. When you let go of how, you invite the divine power within you to function without obstruction. You make room for the unseen to work its perfect patterns. The miracle then becomes not something forced, but something allowed. When I first learned this principle, I did not accept it blindly. I tested it relentlessly, for I knew that truth reveals itself through experience, not through theory. I imagined outcomes with precision, small ones at first, then larger ones, and then deliberately released the entire question of how they would materialize. I watched my mind attempt to interfere, to analyze, to anticipate, and I refused to let it dictate the process. And the results were astonishing. Circumstances shifted in ways I could never have predicted. People I had not seen in years suddenly reappeared in pivotal roles. Events aligned with a smoothness and precision that no human plan could have achieved. Opportunities unfolded as though placed gently before me by an unseen hand. That is the beauty of divine orchestration. It is effortless, intelligent, and always more perfect than anything the rational mind could construct. The human mind works in straight lines, but God works in patterns, synchronicities, and invisible linkages. When you release the how, you allow the divine pattern to emerge, and it will always surpass your limited strategies. Consider this truth. The how is always revealed only after the manifestation occurs. Only in hindsight do we see the chain of incidents, the subtle shifts, the unexpected encounters that led to the fulfillment of our desire. We understand the pattern backward, not forward. The unfolding of creation remains hidden while it is in progress, because it is unnecessary for you to observe it. You do not need to know the route in order to believe in the destination. The end alone must be accepted. The details of how you arrive there are irrelevant until the journey is complete. If you insist on knowing the route before accepting the end, you will never begin. The mind wants a full map, but the spirit requires only a direction, the end state. The moment you imagine the end and accept it as real, the unseen world begins to reshape itself around that assumption. The path may twist and bend, may include surprises and delays, but it is always perfect. When the manifestation finally appears, you will look back with awe, realizing that the process was divinely guided from the very first moment you imagined the end. Think of the imagination as the spiritual womb where all creation begins. When you ask how, you interrupt gestation. You create turbulence within the womb of creation by questioning the process that is already underway. But when you assume the end with gratitude, when you hold the feeling of fulfillment gently within your heart and remain faithful to that inner picture, The miracle grows quietly, effortlessly, inevitably. It grows in silence, the same way life grows beneath the soil or within the womb of a mother. You cannot witness its development moment by moment, yet you trust that the process is unfolding perfectly. In the imaginal realm, the unseen forces of consciousness take your assumption as seed and nurture it into form. They work in darkness beyond the reach of your physical senses. And then in divine timing, the manifestation emerges into the light of your outer world. If you could see how delicately and intelligently the unseen arranges itself, you would never again disturb the process with doubt. You would trust the womb of imagination to deliver exactly what you have conceived. One of the most important teachings I've ever shared is this: feeling is the secret. Not thinking, not striving, not analyzing. Feeling, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, is the creative force that imprints your desire upon the unseen. When the feeling becomes your dwelling place, when you return to it again and again until it becomes natural, the outer world must bend to match that inner frequency. There is no need for a detailed roadmap. The feeling itself is the compass, the magnetic pull that draws the manifestation into your world. Thoughts alone are weak unless they are infused with feeling. Actions alone are ineffective unless they spring from the assumption of completion. But a feeling accepted deeply within the inner man becomes law. When you feel the end as real, the world reorganizes itself to reflect your emotional state. This is why asking how weakens your manifestation. It pulls you out of the feeling and into the realm of doubt. But when you remain faithful to the sensation of fulfillment, the path reveals itself naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. So I ask you to examine your heart whenever your desired manifestation seems slow or distant. Are you dwelling in the end, or are you dwelling in questions? Are you trusting the unseen, or are you analyzing the unknown? The state you inhabit, the inner atmosphere you consistently occupy, is the only cause of either delay or acceleration. Nothing external can sabotage your manifestation except your own doubt, your own wavering, your own divided mind. When you inhabit the end fully, with emotional certainty, the outer world responds with speed and precision. But when you entertain fear, confusion, or frustration, you disrupt the process. You step in and out of the state, weakening its power. The universe responds not to your words, but to your inner state. And your state is determined by what you accept as true within yourself. If you make the end your home, it will manifest. If you make doubt your home, you will encounter delay. The choice always is internal. The external world is merely the echo. When you stop asking how, your mind becomes clear. So clear that you can finally enter the imaginal scene with vividness and depth, without the noise of strategy, without the distraction of overthinking, without the burden of trying to control outcomes. You become free to imagine purely. You no longer attempt to coerce reality or force circumstances into alignment. Instead, you simply imagine, feel, and rest. And in that rest, something magnificent happens. The creative power of God vibrates through you with extraordinary potency. You become a conduit for divine energy, and your imaginal acts gain a strength they did not possess before. The stiller your mind, the stronger your imagination. When you release how, the imaginal scene becomes alive, luminous, saturated with feeling. You see it, you feel it, you experience it internally until it becomes your new normal. From that place of inner acceptance, manifestation is inevitable. The outer world cannot resist the power of a mind that imagines without interference. Every miracle you have ever witnessed, every healing, every breakthrough, every sudden blessing began with someone who dared to trust imagination more than appearance. Appearance is nothing more than the shadow cast by former states of consciousness. It is the echo of previous assumptions, the residue of what you once believed. But imagination is the source, the substance, the divine blueprint from which all physical forms emerge. When you stop asking how, you shift your loyalty from the shadow to the source. You stop worshiping circumstances and begin honoring consciousness as the true creator. You stop giving your power to the world of facts and reclaim it within the world of imagination. This shift is monumental, for it moves you from being a victim of conditions to being the architect of them. Many live in bondage to appearances because they believe the outer world is stronger than their inner state. When you align with imagination, when you dare to claim that the unseen is more real than the seen, you enter the realm of miracles. You become the operant power. The moment how disappears, your creative authority awakens fully. Let me remind you of a truth I have emphasized throughout my teachings. Every desire is a divine announcement. The moment a desire is born within you, its fulfillment already exists in the invisible realm. Desire is not a sign of lack. It is a sign of what is already yours. It is God's way of tapping you on the shoulder, saying, this is available for you. This is already prepared. Your job is not to wonder how it will come. Your job is to claim it boldly, to wear the desire in consciousness as though it were already yours, to think from it, not about it. Thinking about it places the desire outside of you, creating separation and delay. Thinking from it places you in a state of fulfillment, where manifestation becomes inevitable. When you inhabit the end with confidence, the bridge of incidents forms automatically. People move, circumstances shift, opportunities unfold, all without your conscious planning. You need not strain, try, or strive. You need only assume the end. The divine power within you handles everything else. You will notice something extraordinary the very moment you release the question, how? Your emotional burden dissolves. The heaviness you carried from overthinking evaporates. The confusion that clouded your mind lifts. You no longer feel anxious about timing, nor do you feel pressure to figure out the path. Instead, a gentle lightness emerges, a calm expectancy that feels peaceful and powerful at the same time. That lightness is not mere relief. It is a spiritual sign that you have aligned with the end. It is the feeling of inner agreement with your desire. When you worry, you are imagining separation. When you stress, you are imagining uncertainty. But when you feel light, grateful, and expectant, you are imagining fulfillment. The two states, worry and belief, cannot coexist. It is impossible to worry and believe simultaneously. One must overpower the other. When belief dominates, worry dissolves. When the feeling of satisfaction becomes natural, doubt fades away. This emotional shift is the evidence that your inner man has accepted the end. And once accepted, the manifestation must follow. Do not misunderstand the meaning of surrender. Many assume surrender is passive waiting, a kind of spiritual idleness. But surrender is not passivity, it is power. Surrender means energetic certainty. It means giving up the lower mind with all its doubts, fears, and compulsions and embracing the higher imagination with full trust. It means allowing the divine wisdom within you to guide the unfolding of events without your interference. Surrender is the posture of one who knows that the end is secured. It is the confidence of someone who no longer needs evidence because they possess the inner reality. When you surrender, you stop resisting the flow of life. You stop injecting fear into the process. You stop trying to do God's job. You relax into the truth that the creative power working through you is infinitely more intelligent than your limited reasoning. In surrender, you align with divine timing, divine order, and divine orchestration. You become a co-creator rather than a controller. And in that cooperation, miracles reveal themselves effortlessly. If you truly knew who walked with you every moment of your life, you would never ask how. Again, if you understood the magnitude of the creative power breathing inside your chest, the presence of God animating your imagination, the infinite intelligence guiding your desires, you would never search for external solutions. You would look inward, for the answer, the fulfillment, the path, and the power are all housed within your consciousness. The God seated in your imagination is not distant, not silent, not limited. He is active, alive, and always ready to express through your assumptions. When you ask how, you act as though you are alone, as though you lack guidance. But when you trust the imaginal act, you acknowledge the divine companion who walks with you. You cooperate with him. You align with his creative nature. You assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and watch as the world rearranges itself, not through your effort, but through his power. The infinite walks with you. Your only task is to imagine boldly. My friend, when you stop asking how, you open the floodgates of grace. Life begins to respond to your inner certainty with synchronicities, opportunities, unexpected connections, and gentle nudges that carry you effortlessly toward your desire. You begin to live in a state of perpetual unfolding, where each day brings a new sign of alignment. You find yourself in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, encountering the right situations, not because you planned them, but because your state summoned them. This is the beauty of living in faith. You become the witness to your own divine power in action. Life becomes a conversation between you and God, with creation responding instantly to your inner environment. When the question how disappears, the universe moves unobstructed. You stop blocking the flow with doubt. You stop delaying results with fear. Instead, you allow the natural intelligence of consciousness to work on your behalf. Miracles become ordinary, guidance becomes natural, and blessings become frequent. And so, I leave you with this instruction, simple, direct, and profoundly transformative. Dare to assume the end. Dare to feel its reality until it becomes more familiar than your current circumstances. Dare to abandon the question how, completely, and watch as the universe rushes forward to honor your faith. For when you stop asking how, miracles no longer trickle. They multiply. They cascade into your world with a rhythm that feels divine. They become your natural environment, not isolated events. The moment you embrace this truth, you return to the foundation of my teaching. Imagining creates reality, not effort, not logic, not force, imagination. When the imaginal act is accepted as fact and held without wavering, life must rearrange itself to reflect it. You are the operant power. You are the creative vessel. When you stop questioning the path and simply assume the end, you awaken the God within, and in that awakening, all things become possible.